Got a little rough. The rough ones were the misses.
So that was Jerry giving me a breakdown and giving me some shooting tips while out there shooting with Noir on the previous season of Noir. And so I usually like to pride myself on shooting fast. That is until, I met Jerry. And I have some certain bad habits of myself that I'm pretty sure Jerry was able to pick up on, mainly in part flinching. For people who don't really understand the idea of flinching, can you explain it to them really quickly and then kind of give an idea of how you can kind of break that habit?
Well, there's several kinds of flinching, really. Mm-hmm. One is a forward poke of the gun as you anticipate the shot.
Uh-huh.
And the other one is just running at the trigger really hard.
Okay.
I call it running at the trigger.
Uh-huh.
You don't have a perception of any trigger action, you just slap it.
Which I think is what I tend to do.
It's not a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's really a good thing. Well, the way I looked at it, father-in-law Jim Clark was a bullseye champion. He had like 71 career records. The only guy to win Camp Perry civilian shooter ever in 1958.
Uh-huh.
And I had the chance to shoot with him. And I asked Jim this question years ago, about 15 years ago. I said, Jim, what do you do for a flinch? He said, well, hell, boy, I just don't do it. I went, well, that's that easy, But he had 100,000 rounds of bullseye practice. So,
yeah.
But really, what I try to do for a flinch, and I had a really severe flinch. As you shoot, you go through cycles of that.
Really?
So the more trigger time you get, you'll even get worse.
Really?
Yeah. And so what I did as a professional was, my thought pattern was, okay, I'm gonna run at this trigger really hard and stupid. So what I got to do is have my technique so bulletproof, and the way I hold this gun, even if I'm slapping the trigger, I'm gonna pull it straight to the rear.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Where most people mess up, their hand position is on the gun wrong. So when that trigger finger gets wild, it will direct the muzzle in other directions other than straight back.
Okay.
Yeah. So but it also builds trigger speed. Flinch is actually a real good thing if you want to be a speed shooter.
Really? How so?
It builds trigger speed.
Okay.
You know how you find yourself when you flinch and it's really the fastest of the whole bunch?
Yeah.
That's a good thing.
So basically,
look at it. I told Jim Senior, I said, I tried to shoot faster than I could flinch. And he would laugh. He just couldn't understand that concept. But when you stop and think about it, we're all going to flinch. So what you have to do is bulletproof your technique and let it happen and learn how to ride it and direct it in a positive fashion. And it actually will increase your trigger speed.
Wow. Because I think for me, when I'm trying to shoot faster, there's this conscious effort to shoot faster.
Right.
And I feel like the way you explain it, what it seems like to me, what I'm doing in many ways is kind of fighting my natural instinct to actually shoot faster.
Yeah, because what happens when you try to shoot fast, you pull the trigger fast, but you don't release it fast.
Okay. All right. So it's kind of synonymous, I guess, in many ways to lifting weights versus like lifting resistance bands versus lifting actual weights, where resistance band you're getting the tension all the way through the motion versus weights, it's like going up and then you're coming down. So I had this hyper focus on just pulling that trigger and then forgetting, I got to come off of it fast and then pull it fast again.
Right. I think more cycle times.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm walking a stage of fire, say at an action, it's a handgun stage and the targets are really close.
Yeah.
Subconsciously, when I draw that pistol, I'm pre-committed to a certain rate of fire. It's like a water hose. I'm going to turn it on. Then I better find a target because a shot's going to come out of this gun and I got to put it somewhere.
Yeah.
That sounds really silly, but if you don't do that, you're always a half shot behind. Because you're coming into a target, you haven't started half your trigger pull. You're half a cycle behind.
That's crazy. So we're literally talking about fractions of inches and fractions of seconds when it comes
That's
to.
how you win and lose speed matches by, at the end of the day, a second. So if you've had 80 shots to do and you've saved 0.03 of a second per trigger engagement per target, you go the other guy 3 or 4 seconds.
Now, let's say you shoot an incredibly fast string of fire. Can you usually tell the difference between one that, like, if you shot a string of fire incredibly fast, can you feel the difference, or are you ever surprised by how fast that really was when you actually get the time?
That is a real good question. Usually, if you're in the moment, actually your fastest runs will always feel the slowest.
Okay. Because
you have actually too much control. You're thinking you're behind the curve, and I'm not going fast. your body's saying, go faster, go faster.
Yeah.
So subconsciously, you got to let the performance, you have to view it. You can't make it happen.
Uh-huh.
So I don't even think, I don't want to even think.
Wow. Gotcha.
Because once you try to get in there and try to drive it,
Uh-huh.
the performance will stutter and it's going to fall apart. So if you view it, you're really not participating. You're just watching, and it lets you achieve the next level a lot easier.
Uh-huh.
And your trigger pulls your cycle times will start coming in really smooth and consistent if you just watch and get that sight to the next target. Always be driving, but don't really control it.
Gotcha.
Make any sense?
Yeah, no, it actually makes perfect sense. I'm really taking it all in right now. But the thing is like, of course you're known for shooting fast, but you also shoot very accurately. So how is it that you find that balance between speed and accuracy? Because I know a lot of people have trouble doing that.
Right, that's holding the gun right.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people say this is the way I hold it because it feels good, and if it probably feels good in your hand, it's totally wrong.
Okay, all right. Please expound upon that thought, please.
The way I base everything that I do is winning and losing.
Okay.
Nothing else. Comfort has nothing to do with my performance. I don't have a style other than I want to win.
Okay. So then
every technique I bring to the range, I want to doubt it and I want to do better.
Uh-huh.
So once you have the perception of this is the ultimate way to do anything, you curve and stop and you become a dinosaur, and everybody else is racing past you.
Gotcha.
So that's what I try to do, is always bulletproof my technique. And there's only, like I said, there's no right and wrong. There's only winning and losing.
Gotcha. So then, if that's the case, how do you go about choosing the gun? Because I know a lot of people, at least on the consumer side of things, a lot of people choose their guns based on, okay, it feels comfortable in my hand, right?
Yeah.
So how would you suggest one? And honestly, you're right. I think your ability and performance with that gun should outshine whatever perceived comfort you think comes from the gun.
Most, yeah.
Yeah, and so I guess how would you suggest go about? Besides just going out and shooting as many guns as you possibly can and figuring out which ones you can shoot better. Do you have any suggestions for people who are looking to find a gun that they want to be able to shoot relatively well, other than finding a gun that feels comfortable in their hands? Because I know a lot of people who think like that.
That's a broad question.
Very.
It kind of goes to the person's hand size and how much he's willing to dedicate himself to actually training.
Okay.
So if you've got a double action revolver and it's got a 10, 12 pound trigger pull, and you add the excitement of a confrontation in there, if your technique isn't really good, you're not going to hit too much.
Gotcha.
Because you don't know how to cycle the gun, you don't know how to cycle the trigger, and you start jabbing it, and it's going to be a bad performance. So I guess you have to have some concept of your application of what you're going to use it for, more than anything. A lot of people want to carry a really powerful small gun. Yeah. And that's really a bad thing. It puts all the expectations on the shooter. He has to do everything right. Yeah. Especially in rapid fire, you're going to be shooting in the clouds. So that's a very good question, and it's got a multitude of answers. I'm not trying to get around it, but no,
I understand. It was an incredibly broad question, and I think largely because there are so many facets to it. As I don't even know which question to ask first, because I'm pretty sure it's also dependent on is it going to be a gun for competition? Is it going to be a gun for self-defense? Now, would you say that a lot of the technique and fundamentals that you learn from the style of shooting that you do, do you feel like that transfers over into, say, self-defense concealed carry type shooting?
Exactly. The way I judge all my performances is how well I can shoot with my eyes closed.
Okay.
But you probably never heard that statement.
No, I haven't. No, because it took me by surprise, actually.
That's exactly what you see when you're in a stress situation. Hardly nothing.
Gotcha.
And you're looking at the threat and not at what you're doing. So if you can't do this relatively well, I probably had years ago when I did a History Channel shoot, where I drew out a revolver and shot it blindfolded at 10 yards. I drew and shot 6 rounds and did a speed load and had to re-engage the target. Blindfolded. And on a piece of steel, I had about a 7-inch group. Yeah. And that performance, when I was training for it, really taught me a lot about what I thought I was doing and really what I was doing. Because when you close your vision off, guess what? It's just you and technique.
Gotcha.
And that's where a lot of flinching comes in also. The perception of that sight being in the middle of the target and you want to give it a shot at that one moment.
Yeah.
Instead of finishing your cycle on your trigger, you jab it. And that's a visual problem. When you close your vision off, you don't have that problem. You'll never flinch.
Gotcha. You know what's interesting about what you just said? I recently took a Travis Haley low light vehicle darkness carbine course. That's a lot of adjectives. And one part of the course, when it was getting really dark, basically where I really couldn't make out the target, it was more or less a silhouette. And we were about 20 feet, and I had a Glock 19. And we did a string of fire where we started at about 5 yards, and then we took it back each time. My group at 25 yards, when I could see almost absolutely nothing except my night sights, was better than the group I had at 7 yards. Can you explain that to me, please?
That's a good topic. I had that same discussion with father-in-law when he was still around 15 years ago.
Yeah.
I was shooting a little bit of bullseye, and I wanted to put a magnifying optic on my revolver.
Yeah.
He said, you're going to see too much. And at 50 yards, you don't know how to handle it. It's better to have something bigger, like what he shot during his career, all they had was a standard metallic sight.
Yeah.
And at 50 yards, that sight blade is probably 10 inches wide. It covers 10 inches wide. But he's still shooting a 2-inch group.
Jesus.
But the reason for that is, like he told me, if you see too much, you're not going to continue and follow through and let that shot break. You're going to have a tendency to make it perfect. And when you try to make it perfect, you run at the trigger, and you're going to have actually a worse performance. So what you were having in that night shoot was the same thing. You couldn't really see, but a minimum, so you were more relaxed on the trigger, and you weren't trying to make it perfect. Anytime you go for perfect, and that's another thing I used to train at when I was getting into competition real heavy, was trying to simulate stress in a competition. Because sometimes you get, before you get to shoot, they'll give you a 2 or 3 seconds to take a sight picture. And I'd bring my revolver up, and that thing would be shaking, and like, man, this is going to be a bad one. If the timer went off, it usually was pretty good. So I came up with the idea was okay, when I actually train, I'm going to shake my gun and see how well I can shoot. I don't know if you ever tried to do that.
No, I haven't.
It really relaxes you as a shooter to see how much shake you can have and still hit the target well.
Really?
A lot of people perceive you have to be absolute, and that night fire that you did showed you the fact you don't have to be absolute. You just have to be trigger.
Yeah.
Trigger is 95% of the performance.
And you know, it's interesting because you're right. Because what I do remember, everything I remember about that string of fire, because it was something that it baffled me a little bit. Now, actually, it baffled me quite a bit because it just didn't make any sense in my mind. And the one thing I do remember is I remember every crevice, every nook and cranny of each shot and how that trigger felt every single time I pulled the trigger in that string of fire. And because I couldn't see anything, so I was forced to focus on all of my other senses. And so I'm assuming my sense of touch increased, I guess, in some way. And
that's what I call having a moment on the range.
Gotcha.
That right there was probably worth 10,000 rounds of training.
Yeah, it was incredibly eye-opening. I'm still trying to rationalize it in my mind now. Trying to mimic it in many ways.
So what I do when I have those moments, I go back and I want to relive them.
Yeah.
That's what I tell people on the range. You had the best performance in your life. You put your gun in your holster and you walk away. That's not what I want to do. Sometimes I've shot for months trying to get a moment. Then when I feel it, I just want to see everything from my nose down to the ground, how I'm standing, my weight distribution, where my elbows are, my shoulders, my head position.
Yeah.
So I can just live that moment and soak it in and not just throw it away and put it in my holster and walk away.
Walk away, yeah. No, absolutely.
You earned it. You want to keep it. You want to relive it. And being a competitive shooter, you have to call these moments up in order. You're going to relive them.
Yeah,
again.
you're right. Because you're absolutely going to relive them. Yeah, you're right. You're totally
right. So if you can't catalog them and bring them back up, it was worthless.
Yeah.
So I try to catalog them. Got to make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense actually.
So, but you ought to go out and practice and try to shake as much as you can and still hit a target. It's really relaxing you.
Yeah, it was incredibly peaceful at the same time. It was weird. it was like I had the Zen moment, and I was like, oh my god.
That's what's fun. That's what's fun about racing guns, man.
Yeah.
You get those moments, and it makes it all worth it.
No, absolutely. Well, we're gonna take another quick short break, and then when we come back, we're gonna speak some more with Jerry Miculek.